Okay, it's very interesting to note that in both Acts 9 and 5 and Acts 26 and 14, Paul uses a phrase that he says he heard in a Hebrew tongue from the Messiah. It is hard for you to kick against the pricks or the goads. That's very odd because it's a Greek saying, a famous Greek saying of that time, and it wasn't said by Hebrews. It was first used, actually, in a play by Euripides, line 790 of his play Pagan in 410 BC. He omits this line when he's speaking to the Hebrews in Jerusalem in Acts 22. Which is very interesting because the Hebrews wouldn't even know what that meant. But he includes it when he's speaking to Agrippa and Festus, who do know what that means. Festus called him on it, Acts 26 and 24, and as he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad. Now, while this is very unorthodox, it's also um, very inappropriate because the play by Euripides is about Dionysus, which is, well, it actually means divine son of Zeus. It's a play about Zeus's supposed divine son. In a nutshell, a play about another god. So if we're to believe Paul, then we're to believe that the Messiah was quoting lines from a play about the son of Zeus. It doesn't make a lot of sense. If you rewind back to the special instructions I was talking about in another part of the video, Matthew 10 and 20 says, For it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. So if Paul was a true disciple, then when he went before Agrippa, it wouldn't be he that was speaking, it would be the Most High speaking through him. And I just find it very hard to believe that the Most High would be using terminology from a play about a pagan god. It doesn't make any sense. But while we're on the subject of Paul and his affinity for pagan literature, here are a few more instances of how he infused pagan literature into his doctrine and his scriptures. Things that we read every day thinking that they're inspired by the Most High. Aratus, in 300 BC, he says this, Let us begin with Zeus. This is the same deity that we're speaking of before, that Paul infused into his doctrine. Let us begin with Zeus, whom we mortals never leave unspoken. For every street, every marketplace is full of Zeus. Even the sea and the harbor are full of his deity. Everywhere, everyone is indebted to Zeus, for we are indeed his offspring. Epimenides, 600 BC, says, They fashioned a tomb for thee, O holy and high one. He's talking about Zeus again. The Cretans always liars, evil beasts, idle bellies. But thou art not dead. Thou livest and abidest forever. For in thee we live and move and have our being. And this particular poem was about those people who lived on the island of Crete who didn't agree with him that Zeus was dead. He believed that Zeus was an immortal. So he was basically dogging out the Cretes, saying that they were liars and evil beasts and idle bellies because they didn't agree with him and they had built a tomb to Zeus. Now let's go to our boy Paul. Acts 17 and 28 says, For in him we live and move and have our being. Sound familiar? As certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. This is disturbing to me because while he supposedly is speaking of the Messiah, they are not. Yet he doesn't differentiate between the two. In Titus 1 and 12, he says, "One of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said, the Cretians are always liars, evil beasts, and slow bellies," which is what I just read from Epimenides. "This witness is true. Wherefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men that turn from the truth." That's disturbing. He says to rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith. At that time, his greatest problem was Hebrews, who were loyal to the law that was given to Moses. Several times in the scriptures, Paul calls the law of Moses basically the law of a man. He doesn't believe that it's the law of the Most High. So in this particular scripture, it looks as if he's saying that the Cretians are liars, evil beasts, and slow bellies for the same reason that Epimenides is saying that they're liars and evil beasts and idle bellies. And Epimenides was saying it because they didn't believe that Zeus was immortal. Again, Paul doesn't differentiate between the two. Now, there's a few more instances of his infusion of pagan ideology, into his epistles, which are in our Bibles, and we read them and write songs about them, thinking that they were inspired again by the Most High. Menander of Athens, who was an ancient Greek dramatist and poet from 342 BC to 292 BC, wrote, "Bad company corrupts good character." Paul, in Corinthians 15 and 33, says, "Evil communications corrupt good manners." Basically the same thing said, just a little bit differently. The Mahaparini Ranasuta Buddhist scripture, Buddha, says, "Work out your own salvation." In Philippians 2 and 12, Paul says, "Work out your own salvation." But he adds, "with fear and trembling." Publius Terentius Afer, 190 BC, also known as Terence, says this in his play Andria Act 4. I don't know if it's a play, but it's one of his works, I should say. "But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home." Paul, in 1 Timothy 5 and 4, says, "But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home." Now, with all the prophets and patriarchs and biblical heroes that we have, with the Messiah, with all the kings and all the stories of the Old Testament, you would think that Paul would be able to find plenty of suitable biblical characters to base his doctrine on. Yet, he chose to base them on pagan philosophy. Something's wrong here.